Welcome to NASDAQ Trade Talks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, regulatory landscape, and capital markets. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me on the desk at the NASDAQ market site, we have Dan Diazio, Global AI Consulting Leader, EY, Kim Prada, she's Chief Investment Officer of U.S. Capital Markets at BMO, and Naomi Lariviere, Chief Product Owner at ADP. We're here to discuss the AI reality check, how leaders can bridge the gap between inflated expectations and practical applications of AI use in the workplace. It's great to have all of you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks. And Dan, that really is the question. Where are we at this point in AI? Because it is evolving very quick. This conversation would have looked very different a year ago.
Yeah, Jill, so first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here. You know, it's kind of crazy to think, but we're only about 2 and plus a couple of months, years into this generative AI craze. And, you know, we kind of refer to that as the terrible twos. You know, we're making a lot of progress. A lot of companies are reporting some really positive impacts on return on investment. We do a study, 96% said they are positive in terms of what they're getting. But in the terrible twos, you find that there's some bumps along the road, and there's a lot of lessons that a lot of our clients are learning.
Yeah, and Kim, that's what the environment is going through, where everybody wants in. They want to be able to say that this is part of our story, whether it's internal, external facing, and to be able to utilize AI. But then you have to start thinking about, what does this investment look like? How is this playing out in the environment? What are we learning in the terrible twos?
Right, so we're learning a lot about our data, about how important it is to make the data strategy front and center and federated throughout the firm, but really to leverage these tools to gain efficiencies and to drive, you know, more insights about our clients. Like the more we can use these tools to understand our client base, the better off we are, right? Yeah. So that's really a big one.
And Naomi, I'm sure you would echo the same point that Kim had made. Let's solve a problem. Let's just not deploy new technology for the sake of.
Yeah, definitely. It's really important that you're very intentional about how you're going to use your data to actually bring AI to solving client problems, because ultimately, if you're just throwing AI out there to throw AI out there, it's not going to be beneficial to the client or to you as an organization.
Yeah, which is interesting, because ADP, we all know, NASDAQ 100 company, it's a massive company, and you have all these clients coming to you to solve problems. How do you triage that when you're thinking about, okay, this is a product that we're going to deploy?
Yeah, so we spend a lot of time being very intentional with our over 1 million clients, and we're serving clients, you know, from small businesses, we have over 900,000 of them, to large-scale enterprises, and the needs of these clients are very different. For our smaller businesses, they want off-the-shelf, easy to use. You know, I don't really have to think about it. Whereas our larger clients, they want to partner with us. They want us to help them build solutions that help their employee experience.
So Dan, when we think about the AI reality check and understanding, moving beyond the buzzwords, what's widely misunderstood? It's almost like we're labeling everything AI.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we went through such a fast pace of buzzwords. You know, it started with transformers, then large language models, GPTs, copilots. Now we're in the face of reasoning and agentic AI. I think one of the things that many people, you know, put the buzzwords aside, many employees need to start to recognize is that these systems are getting much better very fast. And they're taking on more characteristics. Instead of just asking them a question and getting an answer, now they're starting to develop properties where they can execute tasks on behalf of people. And this promise that they're going to be able to do all of your work is kind of that overhype of what's happening right now. I think what many people need to start recognizing is that as they use these technologies more and more, they're going to find what they're good at, and they're going to find some of the areas where they're not so good. It's those misconceptions, just assuming that the technology is going to be able to do everything than what people do today, that people are getting a little stuck on.
Yeah, you know what I find interesting about it, Kim, and what I have learned, when you use some of these generative AI tools, now they're coming back and asking you questions about the answer that they gave you, like, would you like to learn more about XYZ? And it's made my research more effective, because perhaps it's bringing something up that I may not have recognized, and I think that's where it gets interesting. But again, how do you measure that return? And I think that question hasn't been answered yet.
Yeah, and measuring the return is number one on my mind every time we build software and deploy it to the business, right? That's my P&L. I'm as good as my last release. So when the way, you know, we look at it is, if we deepen a relationship with a client off one of, you know, the applications that are leveraging this technology, then that's a win. And the key is using tech to drive tech. So if you're not building telemetry and all the features into your software to actually measure your success, then you're falling down.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Naomi, what concerns me, and I think about myself, I'm not the most skilled person when it comes to technology, but what about the workforce? Is the talent available for as quick as this technology is accelerating?
It's not. There's obviously a lot of data scientists and machine learning engineers, but where that talent tends to be going is to the larger organizations. So if you're like a smaller, mid-sized organization, you really need to be thinking about upskilling your associates to start to understand the technology, leverage it, and then actually apply it and adapt to it. So,
because I would imagine whether you're thinking about clients and you have this noted here, they don't necessarily want AI forced on them. Internally too, for your employees, which are also clients of the companies, perhaps there are some roles, creative as an example, that might want to be more creative on their own and not necessarily have these tools forced on them. So I think it's a fine balancing act.
It is definitely a fine balancing act. We talk a lot about, what is the right way to apply AI. You shouldn't just stick it in there just to get it to show an impact. It's really being thoughtful about, can I apply this to a call center environment and help my call center individuals improve the experience of our end customer? And you'll see that as a return in your NPS scores and the sentiment from our clients. So it's really thinking thoughtfully about how to solve it that way.
Dan, are leaders still optimistic about their AI investments? Again, thinking about that ROI and as they evolve their strategies, how are they approaching it?
Yeah, I think they're still quite optimistic. We see a lot of companies are even doubling their investments that they had in the previous year. But I think you asked the question around return on investment. I think naturally it's a lot easier to figure out how we can get return on investment for what we do today versus what we don't do today. I think there's an overemphasis on looking at a process that has been built with a scarcity mindset. You don't have that much labor. You try to automate as much as you possibly can over the last couple of years, and now you apply generative AI to that and expect some big return from that. That's not really how it's going to really drive big value for a lot of our clients. Instead, what they need to do is think, what could I do if I had 100 more people to go do that job, and then recreate an entirely new way of doing the work? That's when companies will start to really see the return on investment that this technology promises to deliver as it being a revolutionary force for transformation.
And there really is not that much to backtest at this point. Again, if we use that frame of reference, 2.5 years, if you will, I mean, AI, ML, and algorithms and so forth, it's nothing new, particularly for financial services. Is there a benchmark at this point?
I mean, there isn't really a benchmark. One of the things we believe is that just like we tell our employees that they need to learn and adopt this, we have this motto that we should be sharing with our clients proof, not promises. And that means that we have to execute it ourselves and come up the learning curve ourselves as a firm before we start to go advise our clients on what works and what doesn't work. And the one thing we have found is that the return on investment, if you try to add it incrementally to work today, that's 10, 20, 30%. Whereas if you reinvent an entirely new way of working, you get plus 100% sort of return in that. So our benchmark is just our experience by applying it to our own business.
Well, and that's a great point that you make as being advisors to multiple different types of companies. Kim, it's interesting because you and I, we cut our teeth in the institutional equity and fixed income trading world when we were still, using paper and fractions and timestamps, physical timestamps and so forth. How have you seen AI in more recent years help to evolve the investment process?
Tremendously, especially in electronic trading. I mean, without these capabilities, there's no way you would have electronic order books just sitting on their own, right? So although we've been doing this for a long time, it just gets easier to do it now. Where something used to take like 6 months to do, it could take like 8 weeks. But the back testing is the key, right? So making sure that when you set up your environment, you're setting it up so that you can back test, that you can prove to the traders, to the salespeople why this works, and show the lineage and the full-on, regulatory, the whole end-to-end flow has got to be like rock solid.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought the regulatory environment up. And Dan, I want to, kick this off with you for this part of the conversation. Is it making it more challenging for leaders to assess the resources they're going to allocate to emerging technologies because the framework isn't in place. The operating environment is challenging to navigate.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. I think that's the element of complexity when starting to lay out that strategy, because what we are starting to see is patchwork of regulations, some international differences in the way that regulations are being imposed. And for many of our clients, what they've started to do is recognize that they need to create their own framework that they're going to abide to and start to regulate themselves, because ultimately, in a lot of cases, their end consumer is going to be the judge on how they're applying that technology for themselves.
Yeah, and Naomi, you made a great point off camera when we were discussing this, that you can't let a challenging operating environment stifle innovation or moving forward.
Yeah, you can't. What we're trying to really think about at ADP is how do we take the data and use it responsibly? And we're leveraging a lot of different partners externally to help advise what's the best use case, how do you go after it, and what's the outcome that you're trying to drive, instead of just looking at things and going, hey, here it is, let's make it work.
Right, and Kim, both coming from capital markets background, it is important to have some sort of framework in place because regulation by enforcement makes it really challenging.
Yeah, really challenging. And we have our whole model vetting team, and this is what they do, right? We can't just use this technology. Everything's vetted.
Right. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, too, there is a framework that has been established in financial services. Yep. So there is, KYC is an example. That's not going to change. That's not going to go anywhere, whether you're using humans or AI to make those decisions. You still have to make those decisions within the context of the framework that exists.
Absolutely.
So it shouldn't stifle innovation for that reason alone.
Not even close.
Yeah. Yeah. So Dan, when we think about this and look 1, 3, 5 years out, what are you hearing from companies where we might be? How are you thinking about it? How's EY thinking about the evolution?
Yeah, one of the things that we're really focused on is the technology is evolving so quickly. The linear thinking of first we set up a center of excellence, then we set up a governance model, and we tackle a couple of use cases and work our way through, like that won't go fast enough to be able to deal with the speed. What we are starting to see more of are companies creating companies inside companies or joint ventures with technology partners. We have a team that's focused on something we call 10X. It's part of our EY.AI, where we're looking to really reinvent entirely new business models and reinvent new ways of delivering services. Because in a lot of ways, the legacy, the big corporate structures, is the incumbency that's really hard to break through in order to make this technology deliver on its value.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the argument, TradFi and DeFi. I mean,
Yeah.
that is the argument.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And just off the heels of what you just said, I mean, if you don't look at it, as separate streams all coming together at once at the end, you'll never do anything in technology. So like the way we go about it is you've got data, you've got analytics or AI, and you've got the client experience. And if you're not developing all three pieces at once, you're never going to deliver.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, but I think a lot of organizations are still struggling with those like basic building blocks. Where their data is, how clean their data is, because garbage in, garbage out, right? Yeah. And then, they're also still encumbered by a lot of legacy technology and trying to string it all together. And by the way, like this technology 6 months ago, you couldn't even talk to each other from the different LLMs and stuff. And now that the space of change has gone so quick. And now it's like I'm dealing with legacy technology, with new technology that's moving so quickly. I just, how do you keep up, and how do you think about what you're doing?
That's why Dan's point really resonated with me, and I wasn't expecting it to go this way, but the fact that the model is completely changing, where centers of excellence, which is, Dan, somewhat a relatively newer thing, that the model is completely shifting and changing in terms of structure that quickly is amazing to me.
Yeah, it has to, because the ability to deal with this amount of change at this pace is quite bewildering. What we often find is that the future is going to be shaped by those that are the most active in using these tools. So we're very intentional and sober about the fact that if we don't evolve, this will disrupt our business, professional services business. So what we're really focused on is identifying what are some of those key skills that we need to build in the future to make people much more resilient and complementary with AI, as opposed to just thinking about AI slowly chipping away at people's work. And that allows us, training people to both use the tools, to be able to think about what they're good at and what they're not good at, and how they can accomplish a lot more by using them, starts to unlock potential in the legacy. Then you need to have your separate thing on the side, which is running at 100 miles an hour to be able to try to be a speedboat, essentially.
Yeah, and I think it is incumbent on each individual employee to embrace these resources. It's like I was saying before, with my research, it'll ask a question that I might not have ever considered. So it's almost like, I don't know, you have 45, 50 analysts covering Apple on the street, right?
Right.
So if you use these tools, perhaps there's something in the model that you could extrapolate you didn't see before. And that's when it gets interesting.
Totally. And the way I'm looking at all of this is people, process, and technology coming together, right? Because to your point, you do have to rethink the operating model. You do have to rethink how you're approaching it and how you're going to deliver it. But you also have got to bring the organization along with you. So the culture of the organization is really important as well.
Yeah, this is a huge change management activity. It's not something that it's like one and done and everybody gets it. There's a whole like reskilling of our associates that we need to do along this journey because the technology and the skilled resources just aren't there.
And similar to cloud, right? When cloud came in, it was the same concept. Everybody was like, oh no, what is this going to do? Now it's just part of the fabric.
Yeah, but you're also seeing that pendulum come back where it's more of a hybrid model where there is some internal control as well as external, so that you do have the redundancies in place. And I bring that up because I've covered ADP since the inception of the show, and it's always been around ethics and data and governance and the responsible use of that framework. And this is even way before we even knew what ChatGPT was. It's always been in the DNA of ADP. And I'm just trying to wrap my head around that as you're thinking about new products to deploy, how you square that circle.
Yeah, no, we've been thinking about AI and ethics governance since 6 years ago. Right from day one, we have the responsibility of over 1 million clients' data. So how we use that in a fair, equitable, and ensuring that we're not creating bias within the types of products that we have is really important. So when we think about how best to leverage that data and then bring product to our customers, it's all around what's going to meet them where they're at, because with the different client sizes that we have, the needs are different.
Yeah. And Dan, I wanted to ask you what you're hearing from clients in terms of the tech stacks evolving so quickly, and you have more vendors within the system, which opens up vulnerabilities. How are they thinking about risk management and cyber as it relates to these deployments?
Yeah, I think those are two really big topics right now, because the generative AI footprint is still opening the surface area for cyber attacks that many companies are still doing and building up better red team and purple team testing before they start to deploy some of these AI products into production. And I'd say that it's a big, very strong element to governance right now. But at the same time, I think many organizations are stuck. They need to continue to move quickly, and they need to start to protect some of these risks and learn what some of these new risks are. So we often find many of those first deployments actually to their own internal employees and keeping it inside the company walls, as opposed to starting to do that learning and experimentation on their consumers or their vendors.
And Kim, to wrap up here, as we're nearly out of time, when you think about the capital markets business as it's evolving, how do you think AI is going to continue to contribute?
Oh, it's just going to go through the roof. It's just going to keep coming, and it's going to come faster, and we've got to just really focus on our data and our controls to make sure we can move with it.
Well, data is the commodity these days, isn't it? All right, appreciate everyone's insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at NASDAQ.